Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jamie. I currently reside in New Orleans. I'm a intuitive. I read tarot cards and read astrology. And today we're going to be talking about the first day of the new year, January 1st, 2026. This year is the number 10 year, which is the Wheel of Fortune in the tarot. And if you break it down to a number one, you could do that, which is the Magician. So because it is a 10 year, I am sticking with that it is the Wheel of Fortune and can be supported by the magician. But today we're going to be talking about the numbers of the day, the first day of January. So 2026 is a number 10 year. And then we have 0101. So that would be 10, 11, 12. And that number 12 card in the tarot is the Hanged Man. And then if you do 1 plus 2, which gives you number 3, which is the Empress. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about the Hanged Man. So we're going to be coming into this year, and I do believe this is the energies we're going to be working with the whole year. Um, I personally believe how important it is to stay present. So I usually do not do forecasts. If I do a forecast, it's usually maybe for the season. I usually give my full moon and dark moon videos right near the day of the dark and full moon because I just think it's so important to stay present, especially with all the distractions that we have going on in our lives digitally. I think the key to success is being extremely present. So, but the good news is in this area, there's lots of people. So if you want to know what's could be coming down the pipeline in July. There's people there that can help you with that. So again, always pick someone to work with who resonates with you. You are your own best guide. You are your own intuition. You are your own free will. Okay. Do not let anyone tell you any differently or take that away from you. Okay. Especially starting this year and moving forward. Okay. I do believe we're in the stage of Aquarius and moving out of this age of Pisces, and that is one of the reasons the energy is changing so rapidly and so quickly. And I think this is very telling that we have the Hanged Man to start the year off with. And as you can see, it is a person hanging upside down by their ankle. They are in the Tree of Life pose, which is a yoga pose. I believe the Tree of Life pose, and you guys can look this up too, represents being the conduit between heaven and earth, um, being grounded, being rooted. And with the Hanged Man, it is all about seeing things differently, and we're moving into a new time where we will be seeing things differently. And I think it's so interesting too that this card came up because moving into the age of Aquarius. Aquarius is fixed air, and air signs are usually about how we think about things. And you can see here, this person is enlightened. And so we're moving into this time of enlightenment. Could it help happen overnight? I wish, but it is happening. The more we wake up, the more we will become enlightened, the more that we get in touch with the earth and in touch with ourselves, the more we realign, the more enlightened we'll become. And I also just think it's really interesting to be the hanged man. Um, if you've been on my channel, I always talk about our masculine and feminine within ourselves, that we have both. It's not one or the other. It's not an either or, it's an and. But with this, and the way that we are reading it, and this will probably change, but basically the masculine energy is what's in us that moves us, and the feminine energy is what receives, right? That intuitiveness, that right side of the brain, that creativity. And then we're creative about it, and then we're able to push it out there because of the masculine side. And it works simultaneously. It gets real choppy when I talk about it like that, but for lack of better reasoning or just trying to get us into that energy of aligning. That is the way that I explain it right now, and most people do. But I think as we become more enlightened, it'll be easier to talk about just as people. I don't know if we'll keep talking about masculine and feminine energy, but we'll see. This is where we are coming out of that idea of patriarchy, that idea of power, top-down power. And so the fact that we pulled the hangman, and if we were to say, yes, this man is being hung by his foot and he's being enlightened. And so I do think this is going to be a big year as we move further and further away from patriarchal norms and patriarchal values. Um, in getting back in touch with the idea of alignment and getting back in touch with Earth, right? We say Earth is Gaia and it's a she. So, um, and the idea too that he's hanging upside down and it looks really uncomfortable, but he's not. He's enlightened. He did have to put himself in a different pose and do things differently. But that's where the enlightenment comes from. And again, going back to this idea of the age of Aquarius, it is this idea of answering old questions with new ideas, leaving old ways behind with explaining things differently, bringing in the cosmos, that revolution, right? Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Its ancient ruler is Saturn, right? Having some boundaries. Um, Unlike in this age of Pisces that we're getting at, we didn't have any boundaries, there was, we were just flowing all over the place. But um, Aquarius is the idea of the cosmos and bringing in the enlightenment, holding boundaries, being okay with that idea, um, communicating differently, um, being in alignment, I do believe, with Aquarius. And the idea that if we're going to say like the man part is going to become more quote unquote enlightened, it's going to see things differently. Um, Maybe even this idea of, I'd say doing more yoga, but maybe even this idea of understanding what it's understanding, because the masculine energy is that idea of movement. And you can see right here, he's not moving. He's still, right? He got himself in this position and he's seeing what's coming in. So even this idea of masculinity, that idea of changing, of how we go and get things, like how we move towards things. Do we just immediately start moving, or do we understand that we need to wait for this enlightenment? We need to listen to our intuition. We need to get aligned and then make those decisions on how to move forward next. Because you have this hanged man, and then when you move it into the just the number three, you have the Empress. And this is that divine feminine energy ruled by Venus. This is usually Taurus, right? But it could be any divine. Um, it's any divine feminine energy. But I was just thinking right now that Uranus is finishing up its tour of Taurus right now. So, and Uranus being the ruler of Aquarius. But the idea of the Empress, this is our divine feminine. She's always sitting in a throne. She's always in nature. She is greatly in tuned with the seasons. This is why she wears the 12 stars on her head, because it's one for each month. So right now, where I am in the Americas, it is winter season, although we did have a beautiful day here. And the idea with her, you can see the water. She's in a beautiful field. This is the grain. I'm thinking of Cirrus. Was who's the goddess we get cereal from? Sirius? I digress. But when the Empress comes in, this is all about listening to where you are in life, listening to what season you're in, listening to what season we are in. The Empress is always pregnant and she doesn't have the baby until it's the right time. And this is twofold for me. So it does go back to this idea of being enlightened. It does go back to this idea of being in alignment. But this is also talking about if you've had an idea and you've been working on it for, it could be years, but it really just hasn't quite hit yet. To me, this is your year. This is 2026 is the year that things start making sense, especially if you've always felt like you were a little ahead of the curve. This is that time. This is the time for things to start popping off, as the kids say, but working for you. Understanding how to talk about it, how to present it, how to it's going to make sense like why now is the time that it's finally working and why it hasn't worked before, especially if you're working in more creative fields, especially if you're working, I would think, in more what do you call it, esoteric areas, artists, um, doulas, things in that realm. I think this is going to be a good year for you. The Empress is showing up with those divine feminine energies. But remember that divine feminine energy is about receiving. And both of these people are receiving messages, but you can see both of them they're not hustling, right? They're not actively moving for it. And I think this is also a big clue to how the year is going to go. I think we're moving out of hustle and grind culture. It doesn't mean that we're not going to quote unquote work, especially right now. We're in Capricorn season, who's a sign of work. But it is this idea of being online 24 hours a day, working six jobs just to make ends meet. We're in a tough spot right now in America, especially for being the wealthiest country on the planet. Like, people are seeing things differently and how they talk about wealth and where they're getting with what they're making, right? And this is, again, she's showing us what season we're in as a community, as a collective, and what time it is. And, Venus rules money. Taurus rules money. Venus is about how we perceive our self-worth. And this could be the year when we start to perceive it a lot differently than in years past, especially just moving in that feminine energy, the worth of quote unquote the feminine, right? And again, when I talk about the feminine, it is the feminine within all of us, in the feminine, but also understanding our self-worth, right? Coming out of a patriarchal time, which has been thousands of years, you guys. This just didn't happen in the 70s or 60s or 50s. Okay. I'm talking about thousands of years of patriarchal doctrine, right? And coming out of this and awakening. And this is again as people. And when people start to see their self-worth, they become enlightened, and that's when change happens. And this is if you present as man or woman, however you present, right? Venus represents that self-worth. Venus represents how we communicate. Venus is very creative, right? The Empress is about creation. Right? That's why she's always quote unquote pregnant, and pregnant not with a physical, not just like a quote unquote physical child, but like the idea, the new business, the aha, right? And when it's time, that's when that happens. That's when the birth happens. And so this is going to be a big year for a lot of us. But it's going to be a big year in the sense that we're not going to have to feel like we have to have 32 jobs in order to make ends meet. And maybe right now you do, okay? So take a stock in the sense that the enlightenment is here. Um, our self-worth is here. The divine feminine has risen. And I will tell you, a lot of times when I talk about this divine feminine energy, I understand that it comes off that the men are being left behind, and that's not it. Patriarchy has not helped men nor women, okay? And so, but the whole idea about patriarchal is about a masculine rule, right? A toxic masculinity, but a masculine rule. So, when this feminine energy starts rising and we start talking about it, um, it isn't to leave the masculine behind because we are both those energies. So we have to make sure both of those energies are aligned with us in order to keep moving forward. So it's not up to, not trying to isolate quote unquote men or masculine presenting people at all. It's just that we've got to move forward and really start to talk about this feminine energy that's been oppressed for, again, thousands of years. Because she is here on the planet. She is rising this full moon on the 3rd. is a huge signal to me, which we'll talk about that when we get to the third, about this full moon and this female energy that's here. And when the female energy is there, the masculine has to rise and meet it. You know, we have to have balance. So if you have this divine feminine energy, you have to have divine masculine energy as well, because you have to move as one. You have to be aligned. We have to see things with more compassion. We have to see things with more empathy. And that's going to look so much differently now because we understand boundaries, right? Um, she's sitting on her throne. She knows her boundaries. She knows what season she is. That's her boundary, right? The hanged man is hanging from a post. That's his boundary. This is the enlightenment to see there's so more just by looking at things differently. So we're going to work with these energies for the whole year. So this is a good way to start. I'm trying to think if there was something else I wanted to say about the divine feminine coming in. Um, mainly just to, and if it does piss you off that I talk about divine feminine energy, which I've been talking about now since like 2018, when Uranus first went into Taurus, you know, 2018, 2019, it was going back and forth, and now here we are at 2026. Uranus that rules Aquarius came out of Taurus, but then retrograded back in, and then will come back out. A Taurus and then move into Gemini, I believe. And so we'll start a new 7 year cycle. But that was really, to me, the beginning of moving into this age of Aquarius, welcoming in this divine feminine energy. So she's been here. I mean, she's been here all along, but really, really having it coming in to start to dismantle the patriarchy that we know right now um, now and moving forward. And it's not going to go away, right? And so the idea of talking about this divine feminine energy is also talking about that divine masculine energy has to come up and meet it. And I see this happening. I do see this with men, and the way they talk about things, the way they see things differently. And it's unprompted, so it's not because they're listening to a bunch of feminist literature and getting it, but maybe they'll start, but understanding that we need this balance because we do have to work together in order to keep society moving forward. Even though we are adopting more matriarchal values of that empathy and compassion. And again, going back to this idea that this does make more sense for women now because we understand the idea of boundaries when before that wasn't taught to women. It was just taught to women to show up, to be the supporter, to the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, working with DV, suffering through that stuff. Like women just don't, that's not being taught anymore. That's just not, and I'm 47 and my mom is a feminist, and even though she was teaching us not to do those things, but society was still not mirroring, but society was still working within those confines. That's like now if you watch a rom-com movie from the 90s, it is so it's so bad. Like it does not those rom-coms do not hit with young women. They're just like, oh my God, like that's what women put up with, and that's how men acted. And the answer is like, yeah, and that's what was modeled to us, and that's why we kept doing that. And now we're at such a crossroads where that's not it. And women really are putting themselves first, centering themselves, doing what's best for them. And I know that masculine energy is going to keep meeting that feminine energy because when the feminine is modeling, you take care of yourself, you do what's best for you, that masculine energy will get it too. Okay, and we'll start moving a lot quicker in society when all of this starts to align. Now, it's a little tricky right now because old forces don't want to just tip of the hat and get moving, but that's the direction we're moving in. So that's the direction we're moving in because we are in this number 10 year of the Wheel of Fortune. And so this energy is going to start moving fast. So this is a good day. And within the week, we're gonna have a full moon too, right here. We're starting off 2026 on a roll, haha, if you will, with us. And I'll do another video tomorrow to talk about Wheel of Fortune and the Magician because I kind of want to keep these pretty short as we move through this first week of 2026. Because again, we have this first day. Tomorrow we'll talk about Wheel of Fortune, and then the third is the full moon. And it's a super moon too. So we're starting off the year with a super moon, right? And that feminine energy coming in because as of now we see the moon as that feminine. So I'll talk about her. But I think I'm gonna leave it at that. Wheel of Fortune is here, the Empress is here, the Magician is here, the Hanged Man is here. So let's start seeing things differently. Let's start seeing things in a more enlightened way. When we start to make these choices, make mindful choices, as we say, why are we doing these things? Why do we show up the way that we show up? Why did we stop showing up? You know, these are all good questions to start kicking around for 2026. Um, Communities, where's your community now? Is it changing? Why is it changing? Is it because you're becoming more enlightened? And that's okay. Again, Venus energy, that feminine energy in that divine state really does want to communicate, really does want to talk, which is good for this age of Aquarius. And right now, Mercury is moving into Capricorn, which is a sign of work. And you know who's in Capricorn right now? Venus is in Capricorn, Mars is in Capricorn, the Sun is in Capricorn, Juno, which is an asteroid, is in a Capricorn, and Vesta is in Capricorn. Capricorn is the sign of work. How do we want to work for the winter? How do we want to work differently? How do we want to work for this month, right? The full moon is going to illuminate this in a couple days. We're already in the full moon energy to honestly begin with. So start seeing that. And maybe the way you want to work is quote unquote gentler, is quote unquote softer, isn't as hectic, right? Maybe you don't want to have, your calendar booked to the rim, or maybe you do want a little more discipline in that area. So you want to get a few more things done than you hadn't in past, because it's your time, right? It's your time to get that idea out. It's your time to um, speak to the world, But at the same time, with this Empress energy, it is all about reading the room, seeing where you are, really listening, understanding your intuition is here to guide you and not fight against you. A lot of times in that age of Pisces, we were just constantly arguing with ourselves, and then we would get mad because we knew better. Oh God, I shouldn't have dated this person, or oh shit, I shouldn't have gone and done that, And we're starting with a clean slate. You don't have to bring that energy in with you to the age of Aquarius or 2026. Um, it's okay to take a beat. It is okay to see things differently. Okay. It is okay to trust your instincts, right? It is okay you don't have to make a decision right away, and it's okay to say, yeah, this is what I'm going to do because maybe it's time. Um, Maybe it just feels right. Maybe you start to see a pattern, and because you see the pattern, it's easier to change, and you're like, oh yeah, actually I do this usually because this will trigger that, and then I'll do that, and this, and now I can see that because I'm not constantly on the move, I'm giving myself a little bit of time before I make these decisions. I am listening to my intuition. I do realize it is winter, and maybe I don't want to start a fitness program because it's still dark and 12 degrees outside. Maybe there's something I can do differently that will help me with my health or help me start to get on the track that I want to do, that's a little more conducive to this time of year and not do what that's just been modeled to us from, corporate America, and from our parents or from our friends, This is the time for change because it is the time to start seeing things differently. This is the time for change because it is time that this divine feminine energy is here. She's not going away, you guys. She's not going away. So learn to work with the divine feminine, start a new conversation with her. Start seeing things differently. It's not about top-down power. It's not about quote unquote world domination. Okay, it really is about taking care of yourself. Well, the age of Aquarius is about taking care of yourself first, the individual first, and then the community. So, taking care of yourself, what does that look like? And then, if you have something left over, how can you take care of your community? Instead of just running yourself ragged, trying to be everything for everyone at all times. Those days are rapidly leaving. And there's no energy for that to bring it back. And that's really important energetically, especially where the planets are, those old ways end, and then we're afraid they're going to ramp back up because they kept ramping back up, even though we was like, oh, we crossed the threshold, and then look, guess who came back? The patriarchy. And then we crossed another, guess who came back? The patriarchy. And now, those those energies have left. There's no gas there. So even if it comes roaring back, there's no gas there to keep that fire burning. And I think that's really important for us to remember as we keep moving forward. And maybe a fear does come up, but oh yeah, that reminds me of that. Okay, well, what were the lessons that we learned? All right. Maybe take a beat, sit with yourself. Think about things. Think about, is this a fear or is this real? Because we are in a different time. We've got a lot of work to do. I'm here in New Orleans, and we had ICE come in, we had the Border Patrol come in. It wasn't cool, and it's making people talk about community different, talk about what's important, where are we in this time of our life and in this season. Okay. All right, you guys, I'm going to leave it there. Happy 2026. If you have any questions, please reach out. If you're coming to New Orleans and you'd like a tarot reading, you can book it with me through my website at www.independent street. It's Independence ST NOLA or independencesttarot.com. And again, if you guys want to put anything in the comments, please do. And I will see you tomorrow as we talk about the Wheel of Fortune in this number 10 year.